Chelsea, I also noticed that one of this year's Newbery winners was the chapter book The Year of Billy Miller by Kevin Henkes. What do you think were the qualities that made it an honour winner? And what do you think of the increasing role of chapter books in children's lives now that publishers are wanting shorter and shorter picture book stories?
I have a special place in my heart for Billy Miller because I have lived in Madison. I'm from Wisconsin, which is where Kevin Henkes is from, and the neighborhood that's described in Billy Miller is very much like the east side of Madison, so I recognize a lot of the places in this book. But the setting is not necessarily one of the most important qualities, I don't think, as much as I love it. Billy was peeking out here at the bottom. One of the things that I think distinguished Billy Miller, at least in my mind, is the way that he presents the book to the audience. This book is so pitch perfect for its audience. It's about Billy's second grade year, and Kevin Henkes is really in tune with the concerns that seem so massive for a child of that age, but as adults that we see as pretty kind of humdrum. And he's very sensitive to all of those little changes that kids at that age are going through and worrying about. So there's a part of the book where Billy is deciding that he's gotten too old to call his father Papa anymore. And, it's those little kind of changes that kids go through. And Henkes just pitches this book so well to that audience. His understanding of the child's psyche at that age is just so wonderful. So I think the way that the presentation and the audience is really, really excellent. I also just love the themes of all of those common fears that kids at that age experience, whether it's, saying something wrong and maybe your teacher is mad at you and how that weighs on you as a child. I think they're just really realistic and really relatable for a broad range of readers. And the characterization is just excellent. Billy is a really real 7-8-year-old boy. He gets into trouble, but it's not because he's a bad kid. It's just because he's 7 years old and he's fidgety and he's easily distracted. And I think Henkes is just so in tune with children at that age. And that's what made this, for us, a particularly exceptional title for that age group. It's always hard as a Newbery committee member to compare poetry and, come on, lights, there we go. To compare poetry to nonfiction texts, to chapter books, and comparing Billy to, sort of epic fantasy stories when this is such a book about the drama of the little dramas of daily life, I think was a challenge. But in the end, when you look at what it sets out to do and how well it does it, it was clear that Billy, this is a book that sets out to do something very specific and does it exceptionally well. And that for us was what made it sort of rise to the top of the pile.
I think that's a great criteria. What does the book set out to do?
Mm-hmm.
And how well does it achieve that?
Because it gets really hard when you're talking about, even comparing a historical fiction title, which sets out to do one thing, to a fantasy title, which sets out to do something completely different. And so, as in the Newbery, and even when I'm evaluating books for purchase, that's one of those things I'm looking at is, what is the book trying to do? How well does it do it? And then where does that sort of fit into our collection? Is that a need that we need? And, chapter books for young children it's a area which we have a lot of demand for. And so for us to have some high quality titles in that area is really important.
Also, one last question.
Sure.
You spoke about your Newbery Mind.
Yes.
Which is a way that you've learnt to read in a really critical way. Can you speak about that just a little more? Because I think one of the keys of becoming a good writer is being a critical reader.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I'm putting you on the spot here.
No, that's fine. It's a little bit specific to the Newbery because one of the things I was doing as a member of the Newbery committee is really trying to evaluate books in terms of the criteria. And so the criteria for the Newbery are sort of laid out in you're looking at plot, setting, theme, characters, interpretation of theme. I guess I kind of already said that. Presentation, and so those are the kind of the buzzwords in my head when I'm reading, sort of in my Newbery mind. And so I'm immediately thinking as I start reading, how are all of those things being presented? Are these characters that seem realistic? That's kind of more of my preferences as a reader, but I'm looking for really authentic, relatable characters that I think seem like real kids, talk like real kids, interact with the world like real kids. And sometimes when I'm reading a book and I just cannot see these kids as real, that's a really hard thing for me. But it's different, of course, what that looks like in a fantasy novel from what that looks like in a realistic fiction novel. So having a sense of the world is important as well. But that's kind of when I'm reading in my Newbery mind, I sort of have all of those sort of big words in the forefront. And as I'm reading, I'm looking for those things and I'm trying to tease out, well, what are the themes? What is this book trying to say beyond just telling a good story? I think books that are just good stories are great for our library collection, but for the Newbery, I want it to go a step further, and I want it to tell me something about the child experience. I want it to really help readers understand themselves better and their world better. And even, for books just for our collection, that's an important aspect as well. But I also know that kids sometimes just want to read for fun. And so we have to have books like that in our collection. But for the Newbery, I want it to go a little bit further. And it's something that I've had to learn to turn off now that I'm done reading for the Newbery, just to be able to enjoy books. But it's still I think it'll come in handy as I go forward, even just as a selection tool to help me really kind of tease out which books are doing that extra step or going a little bit further.
Well, that was really gratifying to hear, because all the things that we're going to be teaching in the chapter book Alchemist course meet those criteria, meet those big words that you were describing, which really are the essence of writing any kind of quality book.
Absolutely.
And in particular, this course is about chapter books. So it's about writing for that special age group, which is, I think, a really magical time. And it's really the age when you're either going to make or break readers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which is why, that's a sort of critical area for our collection, is because we really need those books to be enjoyable for kids, because this is when a lot of them are starting to determine whether they like reading or they don't. They're at that point where they're starting to determine whether it's something that's easy for them, whether it's still a challenge. And if they have a book that they're willing to fight through, regardless of their reading ability, then that's going to be a key thing in making them readers in the long run.
This was wonderful. You were fabulous. You
were
very,
thank you.
Erudite, eloquent, and just lovely. Much appreciated. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
My pleasure.